In this video, I'm going to do a build overview of my solo Cryomancer Necro. Now, this isn't going to be a full, comprehensive build guide, more of an overview of how the build works and some of the content that I'm able to do and the goals that I have. But you can stay tuned for a potential build guide coming in the near future. So diving into the skills, the first one I want to talk about is the Summon Skeletal Mage. Now, the whole build revolves around there being one minion. So I take Archmage, and this is what makes it a solo minion build. It allows you to only cast one minion, gives it a ton of damage, health, and projectiles. I wanted to take Cryomancers just because the base cast speed and damage that the Cryomancers deal seemed to be pretty good. And outside of that, I just wanted to take as much cast speed as possible since there's not really a ton of sources for minion cast speed, so pretty much anywhere that there's minion cast speed on a tree in a node somewhere, I take as much of it as possible. Now, one of the big cruxes of the build is keeping the minion alive. Since it's a solo minion, you really don't want it to die because then your damage is 0. So you can do that with defenses for the minion, but to solve the regen, as the minion is taking damage from the shades as well as from other monsters, you want to heal that minion quickly. And we do that entirely just with this node Gray Merchant. You can see it says maximum health gained on crit, 15%. This means that anytime your minion crits, 15% of the health bar is restored immediately. And since we have a lot of cast speed and 100% crit chance, the minion is going to heal from 0 to full almost immediately. This node is crazy. Now, next up, we've got the 2 shades, and the shades give a lot of utility and damage to the minion. So first up, we'll talk about Dread Shade here. Now, to note, we've got just a huge damage bonus from All for One here. And then we've got Egoism, and now this is what gives the minion 100% crit chance, as well as a cooldown, but since there's only one minion, we cast it very infrequently. Downside doesn't matter too much. And then outside of that, we've got, again, just a lot of cast speed, Lone Watcher. Since we have one minion, we only need to have one Lone Watcher, so the increased duration is just great quality of life to combat the cooldown we get from Egoism. And then we've just got more damage granted here. Next up, talking about Dreadshade. Now, really, the only important thing I wanted out of Dreadshade here was again, cast speed and haste. So we have permanent haste as well as cast speed here, which increases every second. So you really want to refresh this as little as possible. So we have unlimited duration. Really, this is just quality of life to not have to cast it over and over, and it allows you to get a nice strong buff after 5 seconds on demonic possession. Now, Bone Curse is really helpful as it's pretty much the only source of damage penetration that we have on the build due to Mark for Death. So when an enemy has Mark for Death, their resistances are lowered by 25%, which is just a huge damage increase. And I also had points that I put into Ruptured Corpse. Now, I honestly have no idea if this does anything. Once in a while, a damage number will pop up like 7 or 15 or something really small. Now, I have no idea if that's from Ruptured Corpse, if it's like something from Transplant or some other source of damage that I don't know about. But if it is really small, that's a kind of a bummer, but it's either that the damage doesn't show up as a number or it doesn't proc at all off of minions. I'm leaving it in for the copium just in case that it does actually do something. Lastly, my last active skill is Transplant, just so I can have a good movement skill. There's not really a whole lot going on here of interest since not many of the buffs on the right side or top of the tree matter a whole lot since I'm low life. But the armor that you get from Bone Armor is helpful with the duration here. And then the Fear chance is pretty strong as well, just as a defensive layer to make enemies run away if you get swarmed or something like that. Now let's dive into the passive tree, starting with the Acolyte base class. In the bottom row, we're taking Intelligence as well as some resists, some more resists and ward retention, cast speed, as well as some life just to finish out the tree. On the Necro tree, tons of increased minion health, tons of increased health, as well as the downside of reduced minion health. Now, the downside of this node isn't actually all that bad, as our minion has a ton of increased health, lots of defenses, as well as recovery. You don't really feel the reduced health here much. Increased resistances again, tons of damage here, crit multi, cold damage, fast speed. Now, the one thing I am a little confused on in this build is whether or not Moonlight Pyre actually does anything. I'm not sure how the scaling of fire and necrotic base damage works with the minion that only has cold tag, whether you have to scale increase fire or increase necrotic damage, or whether the increased generic minion damage works. It seemed in the testing that I did with the dummy that it did help. It was a little hard to tell. If you know exactly how the math works with these different damage types and how they get scaled, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to learn. Now let's take a look at gearing. Now, one of the big problems that I had in this build was HP and HP regen. Since I'm not doing any damage myself, I can't leech anything, and since it's kind of hard to build just flat regen, I decided to go low life. Now, I just threw on an Exsanguinous and Last Steps of the Living because I had it in my stash, and if you aren't really familiar with how these items work, they drain a percentage of your health per second, but then give you a percentage of your missing health as ward per second. So these two items work well together. And if you take a look at my health bar, you can see that I have 92 out of about 2,500 health, but I have nearly 4,400 ward. I was super lucky and dropped a Bastion of Honor just from a Monolith reward chest, and so I just slapped it on this build immediately. The 100% block chance against nearby enemies or nearby sources of damage is just way too strong to pass up. I'm pretty sure Death Rattle is best in slot for your amulet. The 100 crit multi is just really strong, and the 10 int is nice as well. Now, the rest of the gear is pretty straightforward. I don't have it super min-maxed yet. You can see my resistances aren't capped. I'm still shuffling some things around, waiting for some drops. We're just looking for health, minion damage, filling out any of the resists that we might be missing, and skill levels is very helpful, nice to have, 100% not required. For the idols, pretty much everything just has increased health, or we have increased minion cold damage. What I would like to have is 4 idols with increased minion cold damage, with the less damage over time taken, which would just be huge. Taking a look at the blessings, we've got increased minion damage, super strong, fizz resistance, crit avoidance, and void resistance. Everything else doesn't really matter all that much. I think the next thing I really need to do is grind for better rolls, and that would allow me to drop some of the suffixes on this ring, for example, and roll something like block effectiveness instead to get some better defenses. Well, that just about wraps up the solo Cryomancer minion build overview. I hope you had a chance to learn something. If I left you confused or I left anything out, please leave a comment. I will definitely get to it. Stay tuned for a full comprehensive build guide coming your way. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, never stop exploring.